Rebecca, I'd like to invite you to the Zoom stage. And if everyone can also, I think, if you have downloaded NearPod on your smartphone, please have it nearby. We are going to dive into NearPod.
Yep, so the code to access our class today in NearPod is up here at the left, top left. It's XBNOR, and you can just type that into your NearPod app. I'm going to do that too. I'm going to pretend I'm a student as well as being the instructor for this activity so I can follow along with you. When you go into the lesson, it'll ask you to type your name, and then you should see in either on your computer screen or in your phone, this screen that I have here, NearPod, use in virtual classes. Does everyone see that? And even as we go along, if you've missed the code, students can always, that code sort of stays up there. You can also put it in the chat, but it stays in the top left so that people can continue to access it. So we're going to start with the poll, and I'm showing you all my screen so that you can see what it looks like on the instructor's end, and you can go ahead and hide student names, and if you do that, that way it protects students' privacy. So our first question is, have you ever used NearPod before? I have participated in a class, I have created a class, I have participated and created a class, or I have never used NearPod. And once you have put in your answer, I can share and we can see our results and how they change. So it looks like over half of us have never used NearPod. Some people still haven't answered. One person has participated, or a few people have participated in a class. So good, so hopefully this will be an interesting presentation for you all. I'm going to go ahead and continue. So NearPod I saw in one of our many professional development trainings over the summer for teaching online. And I liked it for a number of reasons. One, as Melissa was mentioning, students don't have to sign up for an account. You just download the app and type it. It's kind of like Kahoot, where as long as you have the code, you can participate without having to remember a login and an email and register. So I like that about it. I like that you can save different collaboration boards and other activities easily and send them to yourself. And I'll show you an example of one of those. You can use live lessons or make lessons on demand for asynchronous classes. And what I did over the summer was create the lessons live, do them live, but then make them asynchronous, or what they call in NearPod student paced, so that the students could go at their own pace if they wanted to review a lesson or redo a lesson on their own. I had a theory that it keeps students off of their phones, because if you notice, it sort of deactivates all of your other applications. You have to log out of the session to be able to use the other applications on your phone. I'm not really sure if that actually happens, but it's my theory. And for me, I had very few problems in terms of using it the very first time. As always with a new tool, there is a learning curve, but generally I feel like it's not a very buggy system. It's easy to use, user-friendly. So now I'll share with you an example. This is an activity that we did as like a wrap-up. So I wanted students to just write one word that they had learned from the class, either related to the pandemic. My class was on COVID-19 and Spanish-speaking countries, or any other topic of the course. And these were their answers. So some of them are theories, some of them are just vocab. But this I could email to myself. So this is actually an example of what I emailed to myself after the class. I saved their collaborative board. And it's just a nice tool if you want to remind them of their learning, or to remind yourself of their learning. So let's go ahead and do some more practices. So one of the things that I did in one of my classes was an activity of pairing things. And this was to practice with definitions. The class that I was teaching was on cultural theory, and there were a lot of very technical terms in the course that students had a bit of trouble sort of internalizing. And so one of the activities that they did in pairs in their breakout rooms with NearPod was pairing terms with their definitions. And so if you want to practice here, you can try. We have like, I don't know, chapel and an iconic site on Duke's West Campus, etc. So you can practice with that. It's kind of fun. My only negative for that students told me was that because the terms I was giving them were pretty complicated, the definitions tended to be kind of long, and it was a little bit clunkier in the phone. You had to sort of double click on the definition card to see the full definition if there were a lot of text there. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you do an activity like this. Okay. Then one of the suggestions that I got in one of our trainings online over the summer was to make students still feel connected to the campus even though they're outside of the campus. NearPod has some virtual reality options that have different sites from Duke's campus on their platform. And so this is the Sarah P. Duke Gardens, and you can enter and sort of look around. There's a number of activities you could do with this. If it were, I teach Spanish, if it were a low-level Spanish class, it could just be identifying colors, people, what things they see, what's going on. I don't know, you could use the virtual reality in a number of ways, but we were encouraged as instructors to make students still feel connected to the campus, even though they are, many of them, not physically on the campus. So I thought that was a neat tool. Okay. So feel free to explore with that. The next one, unfortunately, didn't work like it was supposed to. I was testing it right before class, and it worked when I used it in class, but for some reason, I don't know what I did differently today, but you should all have on your NearPod app a Twitter feed, and it was supposed to go straight to hashtag teaching during Corona. So unfortunately, I didn't pull up that hashtag search. It did when I used it in class, and I tried to troubleshoot before, but it didn't work. But if we do teaching during Corona, we do a search. There are some pretty interesting things here that some of them are inspiring, some of them make you laugh, but there's a lot of interesting things. But I included that just to show you that you can use or include a Twitter feed in your NearPod lesson, and as you see, it comes straight to your phone or your computer. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about student feedback about NearPod. So this was very informal feedback that I got. I used this in my course this summer, second summer session, and they said that there were things that they liked about it, but there were things that they really did not like about it. So one thing was having to switch back and forth between their device and like their screen, the Zoom conversation, and the NearPod on their device. NearPod is just rolled out NearPod with Zoom, so apparently you can do NearPod with Zoom, but I haven't tried it, so that would be something interesting to experiment with. I don't know with Duke's contract with Zoom how that would work, but it is a possibility, so that would help some with the going back and forth between devices. It's not something that you should use if you're just going over a PowerPoint, because it's just an extra step to have to go through. As we know, technology should make things easier and more interesting, not be a burden. For some of the activities, I was experimenting with timers, and students really don't like to have their activities timed. So I think as an instructor, you have to kind of just decide when you're going to cut the activity off, and when you forward to the next slide, it ends the activity that you're working on. But I think actually putting in a time really limits students. Some of them really did not like that. And on their phones, as I mentioned, sometimes it was hard to read the text. More than half said it was not their favorite. So I'm a little ambivalent about going forward with it, but I think it does have some really interesting features that can, if used well, can really enhance instruction, but I think we also need to really take into account our students' perception and respect their opinions as well. So I thought this would be fun. This is actually, so in my course, we talk about semiotics and how each sign can have a different meaning, and my mental representation of a sign could be very different than your mental representation of a sign. And so I had them draw what they thought about when they thought of a dog, and it was fun to go through and see what they had drawn. But if you would like, feel free to include a visual representation of your ideal online class for this fall. It can be anything. I'll give you a couple of minutes to draw if you'd like. It is easier. This is one of the activities that's easier on the phone than or a tablet than on the computer. I found it very hard to draw things on the computer, but the tablet with the touch screen is much easier. You can also upload pictures with this or take a picture if there's something that, if you don't consider yourself a great artist, but you want to do some sort of visual representation, you can do that. Look at all these happy faces. Oh, and of course here you could take time to ask students to explain their drawings, what they mean, etc. When we talked about semiotics, we had a conversation about whether one person's mental representation would be interpreted by another as really being a dog or not. So that was an interesting discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Thank you for those of you who participated. And some final limitations or questions. It takes some practice as an instructor, as do all tools. I would always recommend choosing the option of hiding student names instead of showing student names, especially if you're sharing your screen. You don't have to share your NearPod screen, so students could only see like their end and not your end. But I think sharing the screen is helpful. It was hard. Sometimes students would just fall out of the participation. You can see how many students are participating here. And I could see at times that there were students who weren't there, but in the middle of class, I didn't have time to sort of go through, and also didn't want to shame anyone by not participating, but that was sort of a challenge. And I wonder if it's just another app. I like it, but I am cautiously optimistic about using it more in the fall. And to finish, this is what my students said was their favorite part of NearPod, is this collaborative board. So if you will just list one way that you might use NearPod in your virtual classes in the fall. So and the fun thing about this, what the students really liked, is that both I and you can like other people's responses. And I think in our world of social networks, that's become a very prominent part of our interactions. So you can go through and they really liked liking their classmates' posts. Good, I'm glad it was fun. Okay. So that is all I have, and I'm going to end our session, and thank you all for participating, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. We did have a couple come through. Let's see. Carrie, do you want to unmute yourself to ask your question? I think you were first up in line.
Well, I just needed a basic introduction. We just jumped right in. I had no idea about it. But furthermore, and I think that Kimmy did answer the question, if you don't have a smartphone, can you participate? And the answer was, of course, yes. So thank you.
Yeah, and to go off that a little bit, so I had a technology disaster in the middle of the summer session where my computer just totally died, and then my loaner computer's webcam quit working, and NearPod was actually helpful in that because the students could access our lesson without me necessarily having to walk them through things, and I could access it on my phone as well. So in one way, it was a savior. And that's
Great, thank you.
mhm.
Thanks, Carrie. Let's see. Jen, I think you had a question next.
Yeah, it was about matching terms, and when you had the terms linked up, I wondered if you could see what students tried, if they had some missed matching, or if you could see if they did things correctly or not.
Yes, you can see how many they got right and how many times they tried until they got them right.
Great. Amy Anderson, I think you were up next with a question.
Yeah, so the virtual reality feature was interesting. And you said that there are preloaded images. I wonder, is it possible to upload your own? Like if I wanted to go somewhere downtown Durham for something?
So I know that they have a database. I pulled the image of the Duke Gardens from their database of virtual reality, but you can also, one of the things that you can do in your pod is include any website. So if you uploaded anything to any website, or you found a website with like a virtual tour of something, you could link directly to that as well.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks, Amy, for the question. And then Jessica, I think you said your question was answered about do you show this share screen on the Zoom screen in synchronous use, which it sounds like.
Yes,
Yeah, you answered that after I asked it, so we're all good.
Great. I don't think I see any more questions right now. Just gratitude towards you, Rebecca. Are there any other lingering questions about NearPod? All right. Rebecca, thanks so much.
thank you.